Further afield, Britain has a new Conservative Party leader. That's our developing story this afternoon. We brought you that announcement live in the last hour or so here on eNCA. Now, Liz Truss is taking over from Boris Johnson. She'll be the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from tomorrow. The announcement took place, as I said a short while ago, Truss vowing to deliver what she called a bold plan to cut taxes and grow Britain's economy. But what does her appointment mean for us on the southernmost tip of Africa? We know, of course, we've got historic and current relations with the UK, trade and otherwise. I'm joined now by Professor Yossi Mekelberg from Chatham House in London. Prof, good afternoon. Welcome to today on eNCA here in Johannesburg. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you much for having me.
Liz Truss was a foregone conclusion, I guess, by a few days ago, being described as the front runner. Not a big surprise, is it?
No, it wasn't a big surprise. I think the margins were a bit smaller than what's most expected, but still she won comfortably with 57% of the vote. There was a turnout of 82%, but let's bear in mind she was voted by the members of the Conservative Party. The rest of us in the UK, British citizens, we were just bystanders in electing for at least the next 2 years our Prime Minister. So it's an interesting exercise in very limited democracy.
Okay. So who's Liz Truss? Just remind our viewers, she was Foreign Secretary under Boris Johnson.
Yeah, and she entered into politics in relatively young age. By now she is quite an experienced politicians, then served in different departments, different ministry here in the UK, whether, as you mentioned, the foreign ministries or in more the kind of the economic and the financial ministry. So she is experienced in government as a parliamentarian, I think, but she's entering into 10 Downing Street in probably one of the toughest times in British recent history.
Yeah. So from a perspective that there was a contest going with the former finance minister, Sunak, and one wonders what does it mean about the Conservatives? Before we speak about what it means for us, but for the Conservative Party, because they, and from polls that we're seeing, they are on a decline. Elections are not far away in 2 years' time, in 2024. She promises, as she said, and she repeated 3 times, we will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver. I mean, that's going to take some convincing.
Yeah, again, about delivering is we'll have to see that she can deliver. So now, you know, in a few days she's becoming the Prime Minister, and then, you know, there are an array of issues on her desk that needs urgent dealing with, whether it's the energy crisis, Ukraine, you know, generally cost of living, but also for her to unite the Conservative Party, which is not an easy task to unite the Conservative Party, because it's enough to see the last few months, you know, the Conservative Party is bleeding within the Boris Johnson and all the shenanigans until he left office, or still the process of leaving office, and then what the candidates say about each other, which, you know, if you are outside the Conservative Party, if you are an ordinary citizen in the UK, if half of what they say about each other is true, you will be very worried. Having said that, you know, it's the question is, you ask who is Liz Truss. She started as a Lib Dem in her youth, then became a more, you know, she was a Remainer when it came to Brexit. Then she changed her mind and became an extreme Brexiter. I think we still need to know who is the real Liz Truss, if there is a real Liz Truss, or there is a one that says anything that can help her go to the political position she would like to be in.
Yeah, but she got the support of Mr. Sunak, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, the finance man, calling for unity and tweeting. And I'm just going to read the tweet quickly that Mr. Sunak put out, saying that thank you to everyone who voted for me in this campaign. I've said throughout that the Conservatives are one family. It's right. We now unite behind the new Prime Minister Liz Truss as she steers the country through difficult times. A little bit of support there, maybe it will show throw her chances up? Because there's so many problems that the UK is facing. She's taking over at a very difficult time.
Yeah, correct. And you know, Mr. Sunak said what you expect him to say after like this, and don't, you know, come across as a sore loser. He said unite, but I don't think the Conservative Party is united, because sometimes it's about personal issues, and sometimes it's also real difference of opinions what to do next. And when Ms. Truss speaks about tax cuts, where is she going to get the money for these tax cuts? When she says yesterday that it's right that those who earn more on high income deserve to enjoy more tax cuts, I'm not so sure this is going to come across very well, especially as you mentioned that they trail behind in opinion polls. So I think, you know, now that this campaign within the Conservative Party is over, because this was basically auditioning for becoming a prime minister. Now she will become the prime minister in the next day or two. She will have to be the prime minister of the entire United Kingdom, and not only of the rich people, not only of the Conservative Party, but for the rest of the country. And with the kind of challenges the country is facing, she has a lot of work to do, not only to unite the party, but to unite the country.
Should we expect, as South Africa and maybe parts of the continent that got relationships with the UK historically, currently as well, trade, economic and otherwise, a different foreign policy? I mean, she was foreign secretary. When she becomes prime minister, do we expect something different? The focus recently has been around Brexit, for example, under Boris Johnson, and just now this year, the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Right, but I think if there will be any continuities in foreign affairs, because she was the foreign secretary, and I think most of what we see, and especially the historical relation with South Africa, would continue. And I think there will be more continuity. I'm not so sure about domestic affairs. I think when it comes, for instance, to Russia and Ukraine, relations with the United States, and the same goes, I think, for every other part of the world. I think the concentration right now for the new prime minister is to deal with domestic crisis. How it also affects foreign relations, time will tell. But there is so much under a brief now, or inner brief, to deal with. I think that there will be little time for her to make huge changes on foreign policy. That will less of a concern for her at the time, and I think should be, as a result, less concern with countries that have close relationship with the United Kingdom.
The energy crisis looming large. I mean, with Russia no longer supplying much needed natural gas to places like Germany, and the sanctions and all of that, that will put pressure, because internally in the UK, the prices of energy, fuel prices have shot up. People are not coping.
No doubt about it. And again, we enjoyed, those of us enjoyed the hot summer, but the winter is around the corner, and then if Russia keep playing up with the supply of gas, then it's going to affect domestic politics across Europe. Again, the weather will decide what it wants to be, but if there is a cold winter and there is shorter supply and prices are 3 times, 4 times more expensive than they were a year ago, then it will create a crisis. I think probably what Ms. Truss should do, the first thing is to freeze energy prices, because we see that we are, and help especially those who need it most, because otherwise we'll see crisis among the most vulnerable in society. And as a result of it, the competition for energy will also create, especially now that we are still licking the wounds of leaving Europe, of Brexit, it will create more tension with Europe. Just to remind our audience, is that it's not only 2 weeks ago, Ms. Truss couldn't actually, when she was asked whether the president of France, Mr. Macron, is a friend or a foe, she said the jury is out. So now she has to answer to some leaders in Europe whether they are friends or foes. The reality, she needs to work with them.
Okay, finally, Prof, and very briefly, should we make anything, or does it matter that she's a woman?
I think it's always wonderful to see women in position of influence. We need to see more women in every sector of the society have more influence. So I think this is probably the best news that came out of the election of Mr. That we'll probably see more women leaders here in the UK, but across the world.
Hopefully she'll do better than Theresa May, and maybe, we don't know if she'll emulate Margaret Thatcher at all. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon and your analysis. That's Professor Yossi Mekelberg. He's a professor of international relations, and he's at Chatham House in London. We're just getting some analysis following this developing story, the breaking news of the afternoon, that the UK will now have a new Prime Minister from tomorrow, Ms. Liz Truss.